What is UX design? What do you mean by wireframe?
One thing you should think about as a designer is every interaction you have should be valuable.
Logan, excited to have you on the show, man. I know there's a lot to discuss for the audience, for the people watching this video. Can you give us a brief introduction about who Logan is, where you come from, what your background is?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Logan Purdom. I'm based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a UX designer for Salesforce. And I have a background. So I started in design in about 2017. And before that, I was doing graphic design. I was doing music. I was working as some various different jobs. And so yeah, I started in music in high school. I was playing music in a band. I think we maybe have that in common, as I've heard. And yeah, I was doing music and also art and design. And those two things were kind of my main interests in high school. And then in college, I went to school for audio engineering. And at the same time, I took a graphic design course. So I was doing music mainly, but also kind of learning more about design and graphic design. And then I started transitioning into UX design in 2016. I lived in Seattle for a small amount of time. And I was working on music for video games. So I was trying to do that and learning about how video games are made and learning about the different technology that's used in video games and music and soundtracks. And that's what kind of led me to my interest of figuring out, how are these apps made? If someone wants to actually, start making an app. And when I started learning about wireframes, I feel like that was kind of my main insight and where I kind of started to learn how design connected to technology.
You got a very interesting background. Some of it is actually I'm finding today. I know you have you had a band. I did not know you worked in audio engineering. So looks like there was always this artistic side to you, right? You were in design. You did graphic design. There was music, audio engineering. You started transitioning into UX design. It's a path that is not normally taken, I would say, in a industry like ours, which is very tech focused. So maybe explain to us, what is UX design? What do you mean by wireframe? Give us like few words of wisdom, and how can someone transition or build a career in experience design in 2025?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different analogies that are used to talk about UX design, and my favorite, and that I kind of tell people sometimes, is the analogy of being at a restaurant. And when you go to a restaurant, if you go to a really nice restaurant and you walk in and they sit you at the table and you have a menu and you order really good food and you leave and say, wow, that food was really good. That was a great dinner. There was throughout that maybe 2 hours, there were all these experience points of what you saw when you walked in, of what the menu looked like, what the music was like, how bright the lights were, when they brought out the food, how much food did they bring at one time versus coursing it out. And that to me is a really good example of experience design, because people have thought about all those small, tiny details and they've added up what the experience should be. And when you leave, you say, wow, that food was really good. But you don't say, wow, I really liked where they had the entrance where you went and said your name and they sat you down. I really liked the font on the menu, or how low the lights were. You don't really think about those things, but they all add up to the overall experience. And kind of the main point is having a really good meal and sharing that with people and having a good experience. When you connect that to UX design and you're working on a project, say you're working on an app or you're working on a website, there's a few different people on the team, and they're representing maybe the business, or they're representing the technology, so how it's going to be built. And the UX designer is representing the customer or the human or the user, or just whatever name you want to say for that end user, the person that's going to be using it. And so that's how I kind of think about, if the project team is sitting at a table, we're all representing different parts in a really good positive way. And the person representing the business might say, let's build it like this because it's really good for the business. And it'll be, it'll benefit the business. Or the tech person might say, let's build it like this because it'll be very efficient and easy, and it'll benefit the technology in this way. And then the UX designer is in the conversation and says, well, let's build it this way and think about it this way because it's beneficial to the customer. And so it's kind of a balancing act of making sure that, they have a Venn diagram of all those circles and they overlap, and that kind of creates a harmony and a balance between those three interested parties.
If there is a person today who wants to start their career in experience design, can you give me 5 skills that this person should have or should focus on?
Yeah. So 5 skills that I would say are important. The number one would be listening. I feel like listening is kind of the key and the starting point to every project and every feature that you work on. You always need to start from a point of listening and hearing what the business needs, what are the needs of the user and the customer. So I think above all else, listening and starting at that point. There's other skills that are important that come along. I would say a skill is knowing a story, being able to tell a story. So part of experience design is kind of knowing the end-to-end experience and being able to communicate that, even to the business that's kind of thought of the feature, thought of the project that they want to do. You need to be able to communicate the story that they're trying to tell. And if it's one small feature that's adding a button to one screen, you should know the overall story of what happened before that screen, what happens after the user clicks that button. So storytelling is really important. And then, there's probably other skills that are important there. Being creative is one, but creative is kind of a subjective term. Some people think they're not creative, but I think we all make creative decisions. We're all creative in different ways. And, you're, as a designer, you need to be comfortable with starting from a blank page, knowing the process. And there's all different types of processes, but knowing a process that will get you from a blank page to an end product that people can use. So I would say that's a version of being creative.
Got it. So the top 3 skills that you explained mostly are like soft skills. Are there tech skills that they should focus on? I think we have 2 more on the list. So what tech skills in 2025 someone should focus on, right, to become a great experience designer, or at least something to start off with?
Yeah, and I think technology is always going to be changing. So right now, like a practical skill, right now, Figma is a really important skill to be able to use, and that's the design application that most UX designers use. I think there's been others before, like Sketch, XD, that have been popular. Figma right now is the most popular. And that could change. There could be a new program. I was talking to a designer the other day, and they said they use PowerPoint to design things. And it's whatever you're able to use to, going back to that story, to communicate that story. And you can do it in a fast way. And Figma is really good because other designers can use it. You can work on a team. You can share really easily. It works well with developers as well. So Figma is an important skill. That's a technical skill.
How important is it to be organized as a experience designer? Like I'm thinking from a customer journey. The customer journey is not always as simple as, I pick up my car keys, I sit in the car, I go to a store, buy things and come back. There's a lot of things in a particular customer journey. Like even if there's a website, there are so many elements on the website that can actually change my decision. And I've seen, companies doing A/B testing to see how customers react to it. Is there a lot of information synthesis that needs to be done? Because I'm assuming that you are in a room where business either has something that they have already built and they want to improve, or they could be launching a brand new product and it's like, hey, let's go crazy. Let's think about how to do things. And as part of that, the business or the users are giving you information that they already know. You are coming with your own point of view, with the expertise you have in the experience design. You probably have information from competitors on how things are doing, and that's something that is also considered as part of the journey. So I'm thinking at the end of the workshop, at the end of 1 week, you have like 500 ideas, like just like a mountain of ideas. So how important is And I think going back to listening, like you're hearing all these ideas, but it's also like taking all these ideas and how you have in those detective movies, you have these criminals put on a map and then you start creating these
Yeah,
journeys. Is
yeah.
that like very important part of a experience designer, where you take all of that information, synthesize it, and say, hey, we had so many ideas, this is what the customer journey would look like based on all the information that we had.
Yeah, I would say definitely. And I would say just as much as Figma or any design tool we're using, a whiteboarding app is probably used more in every day. So something like Miro, Mural,
Mm,
Lucid
mm, mm.
Spark. So something that is, it used to be probably 10 years ago, a UX designer would, they would be in a conference room, big wall of
Mm.
sticky notes, and
Yeah.
I feel like that's if you Google a UX designer, that's an image that pops up. Like
Yes.
you have all the wall of sticky notes, and people are adding notes and putting dots on sticky notes. And there's those kind of design practices that have translated into more of a digital space, especially in the last 5 years. We're all remote and digital and virtual, so whiteboarding apps are basically a version of that, and there's a
Mm.
lot of benefits. I've done in-person workshops where 50
Yeah.
people are in a room, and we've all used a whiteboarding app through, like, everyone's on their computer, and it's worked really well because you have the in-person experience of all being together. But then after the week, everyone goes home, and you have that all in one place, and
Right.
it's very well documented. Everyone could take part in it, and then everyone can refer back to it for months later on the project. And so when you talk about like synthesizing information, that's a big critical tool, is a place where you can put all your notes and stickies and everybody can work together. So user interviews are a really big part of the role. And I've done user interviews where one person's leading, but you might have 5 other people on the team in the whiteboarding
Mm.
app, adding notes,
Mm.
taking screenshots. And then after you do about 20 interviews, you can go back and synthesize and organize those stickies and start to kind of create that narrative of what's being said. What are the major
Yeah.
points that are emerging? So yeah, I think that's a key part.
It's like a badge of honor, right? I mean, I've seen like customers take pictures of it, like the workshops,
Hmm.
because you go back after you've successfully delivered a project, you go back 1 year and you're like, that was the moment it all started,
Hmm.
where bunch of people from business, bunch of people from technical side, the experience designers, we all came together. We started throwing our ideas on the wall, and we worked on this project to successfully launch a product. But now I want to give you a challenge. Walk us through your example, any example that you want. Walk us through, how do you take an idea from idea to reality, right? Where I have a requirement, I want to launch a product, whatever it could be. What are different elements that an experienced designer should consider, should think about, to take that particular vision from just an idea of of a organization to actually delivering that idea?
Yeah, totally. So I can share my screen, and what I'll do is I'll walk through a process called design thinking. And so
Mhm.
that's a really good framework for how you can move through a project. And then I have a project brief that is for a fictional company that I
Mhm.
prepared that would give us a nice exercise that we can go through and use that design thinking framework to walk through and talk
That
about
is
what we
awesome.
do at different parts of the project. So I'll share
Okay.
my screen here. And so this is a visual that I found that just
Hmm.
goes over design thinking. And I think if somebody's watching this and they're learning about UX design, there's different approaches or different processes that designers might use. They all follow the uh, same overarching approach. And I
Hmm.
think you can find one and learn about it. And there's not a right or wrong process. So design thinking is really popular. And it kind of goes back to that point of listening at the beginning. So that's where I learned kind of that idea. And kind of a side note, so kind of going back to my music background, and I thought about this years later. And I was in band in high school, so like marching band,
Hmm. Hmm.
orchestral band, and our band director, when we got a new band director my sophomore year, and he came in and didn't redesign anything or change much of the program, but what he did was he put in big bold letters, "Listen," at the top of the band room. So when he stood in front of the band, we had about 250 people playing music. Behind him, we saw the word "Listen," and he never talked about it, never made a big deal about it. But I always thought that was a good lesson and a good thing to remember. Was that's a skill. Going back to all the skills we talked about, starting from a place of empathy, you start the project and you think about the sticky notes on the wall and like, the different people from the business coming in. That's an important part because you're listening to all the different people on the project, listening to their viewpoints. You're listening to what they really care about. You don't kick off the project and come in and say, "Here's what we're going to do," because we're so good and we know how to do everything. You really start from a place of, I'm not an expert in this area. So UX design, it can have I kind of think of it as like a bag of tools that you carry to different industries or different types of apps or features or websites or projects. And you might start a project in an industry you're not familiar with, and starting from a place of empathy is really helpful because you're all ears. You're saying, okay, I'm here to learn. I'm a subject matter expert on UX design, but everything about this business might be new to me in terms, maybe it's an energy business or a biotech business. And so that framework and that mindset really helps you kind of navigate different types of projects. And so the next part moves into define. So this starts to kind of put some framework and, that synthesis word we talked about earlier. You might start to think about the user research coming together and kind of think about pain points and opportunities. And after we look at the design brief, I'll kind of go into more detail of what happens in these parts. But the next part's ideate. So this is you kind of think about the creative part of the project. You're creating ideas, different design options and versions and concepts. After that's prototype, and this kind of has different looks different on every different project. So prototyping is basically you're building some type of functional version of your design before you're actually building it out. So some way you can touch it, use it, interact with it, and it might be a clickable prototype in Figma. It might be sticky notes that you put on a wall and people pretend like they're clicking through. So that's a lo-fi prototype that I've seen. And maybe it's a video of you just narrating what the website does. And so it's some type of prototype just to bring your designs to life. And then testing is more into, we're building out what we've designed and we're starting to run through tests and we're getting information and data, and implement is go live. We've launched it. And I want to point out there's arrows on this, and this is a big part of design thinking overall process, is it's a continuous process. So after you're going to go back into empathizing and defining. And so it's not a linear process. It's A to Z sometimes, but sometimes it's a continuous process. And so that's a big part of it too. So that's why this kind of has a radial design and kind of loops back and forth, because the parts repeat, and you might go through define, ideate, prototype several different times before you arrive at the right solution.
The thing that I noticed the most is the circle that has the most arrows pointing to it is the empathize. So no matter where you are, like even if you've implemented it, you are empathizing, going back to the business and getting feedback.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've done that on projects where we've done user interviews, and this kind of goes back to like basically not having much. When you start, you might not have the most expertise on like what company, what industry you're working with, and you do user interviews and you're learning really fast and getting up to speed. But maybe in the ideate phase and the prototype phase, it might be helpful to go back and read those interviews again, because now you have a better framework, you have a better understanding of what they were saying. They talked about pain points and things that weren't working, and then you go back 3 months later and read those and remind yourself and get more insight and say, oh, okay, now that I understand this more, I get this insight. So yeah, it's a really good point about most arrows are pointing back to empathize, and you'll have to do that on the project throughout.
How long does this last, the whole phase?
It changes project to project, and unfortunately, I would say the first two phases are sometimes overlooked or sometimes not considered at first, and if you thought about the UX designer's role and the experience design, it is oftentimes the responsibility of the UX designer to advocate for these early phases. Sometimes a project can go straight into build. Sometimes they know what they need to do, they're ready to build, or when they're thinking about the scope of the project, they're thinking we have 3 months. We need to make it very efficient, and we need to start working in 3 months. And you can say, well, what if we took 2 weeks at the beginning of that timeline and had workshops and interviews and thought about what really needs to be done, and that can save you so much time later. So it's kind of that idea of going slow to go fast. Let's not just jump right in. Let's do our work and really understand the problems, understand what the business wants and needs. And then that will save you time later, because then you won't have to go back and fix things, and maybe you build something and the business says that's not what we wanted, that's not what we need. So it's the role of the UX designer to communicate that importance, advocate, and really lead the early stages of user research and define and understanding the problems.
We've just started a project, and we'll go through this phase, right? These are 5 phases. What next? How do we bring it to reality?
Yeah, so what I thought would be helpful for our conversation today was, instead of we could talk about hypotheticals and analogies, but I thought it'd be fun to have an example. And so I went to ChatGPT and I just said, give me a project brief that would be for a fictional company. And I had a type of project in mind. So I kind of described what type of project I wanted to work on for this exercise today. And so it gave me an overview, objectives. It also gave me a timeline. I also said, give me stakeholders. So we're going to talk about AI and how to use it in other videos. But one thing I really love about this generative AI is you can say, give me names and timelines, and it'll just imagine. I'll say, okay, here's the names of stakeholders and a budget. It even put a budget in here. So, but basically, essentially, this project is a little bit different than a standard UX design project, because in a previous role, I worked for a design firm that did interactive exhibits. So what this is, it's a brief for we're going to be in a executive briefing center for a company. And so this is what ChatGPT gave us, a company called Horizon Link Communications. It looks like they have a headquarters in San Francisco, and they have a briefing center where they bring in executives, they bring in leaders from other companies. And this exhibit that they want to build, it wants to be interactive. So that tells us, okay, people need to be able to walk up to it, use it. And if I was reading every word of this through here, I would see, okay, it needs to have a range of product solutions and R&D initiatives. So that tells me the content, the type of content they want to show. And this is definitely important, where it says touch-based. Or gesture-based. Maybe when we look at the budget, we'll talk about that. But today we'll talk with touch-based. So someone walking up to a screen, interacting with it, and seamlessly integrates into the existing architectural language. So that's kind of thinking about, again, the experience, not just of the screen and of the buttons, but we zoom out and think, okay, we're actually in a space, we're in a building. So the experience of this needs to be coherent and match what's the design of the brand. So this talks about, the brand is bold, future ready, and human centered. Horizon Link is my client, my customer. I need to be in line with how they communicate, how they visually communicate. And so I'm already starting to think, okay, I need to be empathetic to what Horizon Link wants, what they already view themselves as a brand. And then we're in the space. And what we would probably do is, next in this, as a UX designer on a team, it's sometimes just about the admin work of what's the timeline, what's going to happen first. In this, like I said, it gave us some information, and we won't go through everything, but I thought this was fun to kind of just show, like, okay, target audience, this is a really good one. And if you're working on a project, so say if you're watching this and you're kind of thinking, this is all great, but not every project gives you the exact information. It's it's a lot of asking questions in the beginning. So if this wasn't included here, one of my questions would be, well, what's the target audience? Who's going to be using this? So you might ask that question, and then the business is able to say, well, we're going to have executive visitors, industry analysts, individual stakeholders, internal leadership. So out of all this information, we're going to find out what we're building and who we're designing for. Those are two really important things.
What is a future vision wall? Is that like they are North Star, like, or is this still part of the requirements? I see like product portfolio overview, future vision wall, customer spotlights. Is that still part of the requirements? Like these are the things that they want to feature for this target audience.
Right. Yeah. So this looks like let's pretend when Horizon Link put this brief together, this looks like a list of features that they wanted to have in the interactive wall.
Got it. Okay.
Users able to walk up to it, and this might start to outline, here's some key things that an executive visitor would need to be able to find and interact with. So that's a really important thing here. That starts to kind of tell me, okay, these parts, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we already kind of have 5 requirements of what needs to be in this interactive experience. So what's going to be in here? Who is it for? And this is just an example of maybe some other information that you might get on a project. So timeline is going to be really important, because going back to our design thinking process, this helps me know, okay, 3 to 4 weeks, it looks like that, empathy, define phase, and, point of contact. That's always really good to know, is like who you're going to be meeting with, who you're going to be presenting to, and design considerations, obviously. And I think, this is highly unlikely this would be included on most projects, but this is really nice to have of what they're kind of thinking about when they create this. And
this would also be a given, right, for an experienced designer in today's world. Like they want to make sure that when they're designing systems, it's scalable. Of course, it's accessible for everyone. Like, would that be something that even if a customer doesn't give, like it's always part of your consideration when you're designing something?
You should have considerations, and then read through, briefs or documents at the beginning. And if they're calling these out, this tells me, okay, they're thinking about them too, and they're going to look for those in your presentation and when you talk about wireframes. And so maybe in another project, I might consider these. They would be in the designs, but maybe not something I would kind of drill into of like, okay, let's call out the accessibility of the page or the interactive exhibit. So this being included in the brief tells me, okay, we kind of have some, we need to signal to them when we present, we're aware of these things, we're considering them, we've got it covered. Yeah, again, I'll just, we'll kind of say this as an example of, this is a really nice to have document. On a lot of projects, you might have just this project overview. You would need to pull out this other information through interviews. And one thing I've learned, and a design director told me this a long time ago, one thing you should think about as a designer or anyone that works with customers is every interaction you have should be valuable. And that means you should take notes, and you should have questions ready. And in every interaction, every call, it might just be a 15-minute or a 30-minute, hey, we're going to talk about this small little subject. But you can pull out other information, or they might mention, randomly. They might say, yeah, we're really, the VP of so-and-so, they're really thinking about scalability across all projects. And they don't even say it to you, or they don't say, this needs to be definitely in here. But you should always be listening and make sure you're getting, you're capturing as much information as possible from every interaction. Because there's maybe all these small little touch points on a project, and you should be able to pull out value and pull out notes and remember things, and those will inform your designs. Because when you're getting into the wireframes and the design process, you'll have this foundation of information. And so going back to this brief, brief might be really short. It might be very high level of, we have a space. It might be a picture of the wall. They might say, here's a picture of the wall. We need something here, and here's the budget. And it needs to be ready in 3 months. And then you're thinking, okay, I know the brand's Horizon Link. I'm going to go to their website. I'm going to look at their brand. I'm going to look at their company. There's probably interviews out there. One tip I always tell designers, and I love to do this, is to go to Reddit or go to places where people talk about a brand and find places where customers or people are discussing a topic and kind of get like a inside view of what people are just talking about and saying. And that will give you a really kind of fly on the wall perspective. Yeah, and it kind of helps you. It goes back to like who I'm representing. I'm representing the customer and the user. And so, maybe it's kind of like the analogy of like an actor or someone that's doing research on like playing a role. They want to learn like who is this person? Because maybe I'm not a customer of Horizon Link, but I want to know, I want to walk in the customer's shoes. I want to know like what they care about, what they think about. And so that'll help me as we're designing this experience kind of know how it would best be designed. Yeah, so all that say, that's a brief. That's an example of a brief. Okay. Anyone watching this can go to ChatGPT or any AI tool. You can ask, give me a brief, give me a design brief on an app or, just high level. And it's fun to kind of play around with these parameters and ideas. So I wanted to go through this and then go back to our design thinking process.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Kind of talk about. So if we're thinking about the first stage of empathy and listening, we kind of talked about this before, but I'll list out. So user interviews. So user interviews are going to happen here. So as we go through this, I'm going to kind of talk about what major things happen in each stage, and maybe not for every project. Every project won't have all of these, but these would be the main things I would think about. Obviously, we have our kickoff here. So this might be where the team talks about that brief, and you can think about questions. You can ask some questions there, timeline, budget, things like that. And then you start to put together the schedule of user interviews. We'll say here research. So this is, going to Horizon Link's website, looking at their brand. Maybe you want to get their brand guide. So most major companies have a brand guide from marketing. So that's really good to have. Let's put a note here on research. This would be going to those forums, and reading about things, and user interviews. Also, one thing might be documents before the projects. These are really valuable because those initial sales calls or introduction calls, they might have a notes in there on exactly what they want. I'll put another thing here as timeline. So there's been some projects where I've made the timeline because maybe they say, okay, we know when we're going to build, we know what we're going to do in terms of everything after design. So I'll put together a timeline on it. Okay, if you give me 6 weeks, this is what I'll do in the 6 weeks. I'll interview, research, define. This gets into research synthesis, and kind of going into more of what this looks like. So we've said synthesis a few times, and more detail of what that looks like is you're talking about you're reviewing the pain points that were mentioned in the user interviews, and you're also looking at overall narrative, and you're also looking at the current state. So it's good. It's a good plan. So this project is a little bit more, it's a net new experience. But
would current state also be part of the empathizing when you're talking to user interviews? That's where you're also like current state would fall in empathize plus define. Is that like something that falls in both these things?
Yeah, we can kind of put maybe that more here in the middle, and that might. So user interviews, one of the things they would go through is, this is how I do it today. And so if you're working on like a Salesforce project, and they say, okay, in our old system or our current system, this is how we do it. And you would take screenshots of that and then start to stitch them together in a whiteboarding app and say, okay, this is how they do it today. And then that's where the pain points come in. And you say all the pain points are happening here and here. Going back to our design brief and our experience center or briefing center, the current state would be, okay, we have this big briefing center. Maybe it's got some experiences around the corner. It's got an entryway and this meeting space in the middle. And so that would be maybe a floor plan. And that would be understanding, okay, what's our current environment that we're going to be building in? And that would inform us of anything we're going to add in this space needs to match and needs to meet the brief and enhance the space, but also be aligned with the current. And so research synthesis, define, and I'll also put here prepare, research, readout. So this gets into, I wanted to think about, okay, what's the design thinking process, but also where's probably the point where we're going to present.
Right.
We're not gonna do things in a vacuum or in a bubble. We're gonna present to the customer at various points, and that's a really important part because you want them to be aligned throughout the process. Alignment is one of the big words I always think about, and when you don't have alignment on a project, you feel it, you really know it. And so alignment, and I started thinking about this recently. Alignment is not something like an event on a project. Alignment is a process that you're always trying to make sure is there, and so alignment might happen with the research readout that says, okay, we did 20 interviews, and this is what we heard, and at this point, there haven't been any ideas. There's no design ideas. There's nothing. You're starting to put together a point of view. And you definitely have ideas in the background, and you might have some concepts and sketches. But at this point, you're just saying, we listened, this is what we heard. And at the end of this research readout, you would start to put together a plan of this is based on what we heard, this is our plan forward. And you would start to, you would point towards what you're going to build and design, but you're not just outlining or laying it all out at the beginning of this phase. That's not everything that would happen in define. There would be other things, but I want to just kind of hit the main things would happen. In ideate, so we went and did the research readout. We presented that to the customer. And ideate this is concept designs. I'll put sketches here. This would be multiple versions. So this is a big part, and this brief that I came up with, that ChatGPT came up with, this is based on a similar project that I worked on, and multiple versions was really important because we created about 10 different versions internally. We presented 3, and the very last one we came up with was what the customer went with because it closely matched their vision. It was within budget, timeline, but it was the very last minute, like, okay, this could maybe work. But doing those 9 other versions really helped because you
get to see the options.
Yes, yeah, options.
Yeah.
And maybe some versions were variations. They weren't all totally crazy different ones, but I really love multiple versions, and that's what I think about in ideate is the more the better. I'll put that as a no, because at this point, the more the better is great. At a later point, when you're implementing, you just
want one. So you want to start with the big funnel and then
Right.
keep reducing the size of the funnel to finally have one idea.
Yes, exactly. So it's really important to know at what part of the project do you want a lot of different ideas. And so earlier the better, the more the better. And then ideate and
so one question that I had, I just took note of, was project scope. The scope of the project, is that typically decided during the kickoff, or because I'm thinking, hey, I'm a customer, I have $500,000 to spend. I know these are the things that I want, basically, right? You're starting these analysis, right? You're interviewing the customers, and you're finding these interesting patterns. At what point do you say, hey, you know what, we can't meet your budget? Like, does that happen? Is there like a pre-discovery that is done, or does that happen during define phase where you say, hey, we've done all the analysis and we could do, and probably that's where the options come into play, where you say, hey, option 1 to 5 is what we can deliver in your budget, but the better experience is option 7 to 12, right? And for each of these options, here is the extra amount that you would spend, but here is your return on investment based on our assessments. Like, does that happen usually in the ideate phase or in the define phase?
So that can happen in the idea phase. And so this part would be where
Hmm.
we present, okay, let's say we have 3 different versions. This is where we come in with the point of view. And I
Okay.
know we can go back to prototype in a second, but this is where we would come in with our designs, our
Hmm.
presentation, our point of view, and say we have 3 options.
Hmm.
Option 1 meets all your requirements and is in the budget,
Hmm.
and it is it meets the requirements. And it's always important to come in with an option that does that, that says, okay, if you want, XYZ, we've accomplished that, and here's how you would do it.
Hmm.
But if you were able to spend, let's say we could increase the budget by 10, 15%, maybe there's a timeline that's extended, then this is what we could do. And you want to make sure you're coordinating. This goes back to the teams that we talked about early on.
Hmm.
You're coordinating with all the teams. You never want to have an idea that's not feasible
Hmm. Hmm.
to the customer. So you always want to make sure things are feasible, and you're talking to the project manager, you're talking to the sales team, you're talking to the developer,
Hmm.
and you're making sure, okay, we're aligned on how this could be done. And that first option is feasible, meets timeline, meets budget. And then you would use the help of those teams to kind of detail out that second option of, if we really wanted to do this way, it could be in this timeline, in this budget,
Hmm.
and it could look like. But I think 2 things are, you always want to come in with something that fits within the bounds of the project, and then just multiple options. And I've had presentations where, let's say I'm just doing a wireframe or a review of a feature, and I have one main version I'm presenting. In the design file, let's say in Figma, I would have 2 different versions as a backup. So maybe in the call, let's say it's an hour call where we're going through a wireframe presentation. If they start to say, this is good, but I really don't like this part, that might be a segue into another version that I did,
Hmm.
where I say, okay, well, we actually had this other version that it went kind of this direction, and I think that's kind of an idea of always being over prepared, and
Hmm.
you know what you want to present, but you off screen, in your back pocket, you kind of have a few different options. And then there's been other calls where I've made a 4th option or a new option during the call, and
Uh-huh.
that it just kind of comes with, being collaborative and
Hmm.
and being comfortable with, hey, we've made these options, and I'm comfortable with creating something on the fly that I know is feasible.
Hmm. Hmm.
I've learned enough in, some technical aspects where you can say, okay, we could do this option and it'd be feasible.
Hmm.
And so I think that's another part, is just kind of collaborating with the customer.
Awesome. All right. So I didn't mean to derail your train of thought.
No, great question. That was good. And that's kind of, if you kind of thought about ideating and prototyping, they're really going together. And
Hand
this
in
is,
hand, yeah.
I'm going to put the main part of this is interactive, and interactive designs. This might be where feasibility is a really important part of this. So before this, you've come up with a lot of different options. You've thought about kind of that blue sky.
Yeah.
And now you're bringing in the developers, you're bringing in the technical experts, and you're saying, okay, what's feasible? I want to make sure I'm realistic. And I heard a phrase, a design director told me this recently. He used a phrase, reinforced reality. That's what designers with wireframes can do.
Hmm.
You can be inspirational, and you can be very imaginative at early parts of the project. But at this point, we want to reinforce reality and say, this is what will be built. We haven't developed it yet. We haven't built it yet, but this is what it will look like and feel like work. And that's a big role of UX design, is helping the customer understand before all the resources are spent on building. we've brought it to the most realistic point
Hmm.
before we actually go into development. So that's probably one of the main roles and main
Hmm. Hmm.
requirements of the UX designer. Yeah, and so I kind of think about these first stages as like a ramp up, like you're slowly building up, and you're starting from the ground and kind of going up into this present. So you're presenting all the your vision and the designs, and you're reinforcing reality. And then at this point, it might repeat, like we talked about earlier. They might say, these are good, but we want to see some different options, or we want to go in a slightly different direction. And then you might go back and ideate more, prototype, and present again.
And
And
really, what I'm noticing is that there are a lot of sticky notes in the beginning, which means a lot of activities in the beginning, and then towards the end, like I'm seeing the number of sticky notes are actually reducing, because you started with something that was massive, something that was broad, and now you're narrowing it down as you have a better understanding of the business and as you're aligning with your final stakeholders.
yeah, definitely. And one thing I wanted to note, because we haven't talked about wireframes much here,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah.
lo-fi wireframes would, and this could change and be different for every project, but lo-fi wireframes would be happening here, and then hi-fi or high fidelity wireframes would be here. And I wanted to kind of point to some references. So like when we talk about lo-fi,
Hmm.
so this is an example I just found online, and on the left would be our lo-fi. I could sketch this on a piece of paper,
Hmm.
maybe during a call or during an early design session. We're just sketching this out, and then over time we're adding more detail, more fidelity, where we get to a high fidelity mock-up. So that's a really important part, is kind of not just going straight into high fidelity. We can make it look really good. This first part helps us iron out the UX design, helps us know the narrative and the user experience. And then we can add more detail, think about, okay, what's the text here? What it looks slightly more realistic, and then moving into hi-fi. So that was the part I was going to call out. And then after we present and we get approvals on designs, testing for UX design can look like, we mentioned this before, A/B testing,
Hmm.
testing with developers. So actually testing in the environment, going through, implement is deploy, go live. And like we said, there could be points where we go back and we think, okay, for some reason we need to redesign this part. So we go back to an early stage, or we maybe even go back and start to work on new features. So we think about what was said in the user interviews, what were pain points, and we design more. So early in the project, maybe these early parts take longer. But then later in the project, as you're working on more features, new updates, then you can start to go through that faster and design faster. So
Got it. So really, if I'm just summarizing this, in the beginning, after the kickoff, I'm interviewing users, understanding what their current state is, getting their brand guidelines to to get as much information as possible. In phase two, which is defining, that's where I'm like a detective. I have tons of information. I'm going to synthesize all of that information to create a narrative for my customer. Phase three is where I'm ideating, right? This is where I put pen to paper. It could be just creating low fidelity wireframes. You could use Excel, PowerPoint, whatever you want, just basically sharing, hey, these are my 10 ideas on how you can achieve this. You narrow it down to probably 3 ideas, and you start creating high fidelity prototypes to create an interactive experience. This is where you could use tools like Figma, where you say you click here and it takes to the next screen, and you actually start seeing how it would look if it was to be designed. Testing is where you actually develop this functionality. Is that correct? You develop this in like the lower sandboxes, like so that people can test what the experience looks like, and if it looks good, then we say, yeah, this looks great. Let's actually push this to production.
right, and let's put a sticky note here that says, this is a big point, where it says designs are approved, because we always want to know, okay, that's kind of the point of no return, and developers can start building. We've gotten the stamp of approval, and so that's, if you kind of zoom out of the, I'll zoom out the right amount. That kind of gives us a good inflection point in the project, where it says, okay, these designs are approved. those approved designs, we're not going to go back and ideate on them. We're not going to go and start to think about the colors or the sizes. We've gotten approved designs. They're going to start to be built. So the testing is more on helping the developers. A/B testing might be some factors of, okay, we've approved these designs in these versions, and we need to figure out what version is going to be built. But approved designs are kind of a big point in the project.
This is fascinating stuff, man. Like there's so much that goes on from an experience design standpoint, right? And I think just going back to what you mentioned in the beginning of this video is skills that are very important, soft skills, synthesis, alignment, and I think I just see that across the board. When I look at these sticky charts, there are really maybe like one section where technical skill like Figma is used, which is high fidelity wireframe, but everything else is speaking with customers, understanding what their current state is, understanding what they want to design, putting that maybe on a piece of paper, ideating with them, collaborating with them while staying under budget or within budget, within timelines, collaboratively deciding what ideas are feasible and will provide maximum return for the customers, and then basically creating high fidelity wireframe. So I just it all starts to tie back together. Like two things that really stick out is, like I said, the one thing is the amount of soft skills that someone needs, and the patience and the ability to research. The second thing is, like you said, right, it's creating a harmony. You feel like multiple people in here, you have kickoff, which probably executive senior leadership in there, then you actually start talking to people who are using the system to understand what the current state is. You're communicating up again to the leadership saying, hey, here are my ideas, I've spoken to your users, this is what we've found out, this is what the journey should be. But then you're also working with the technical people, or architects, to say, hey, I have these 10 ideas, which ones are feasible? I am a very impatient guy, and maybe this is something that we would want to cover in part 2 of experience design. One thing that comes here is there's a lot of research, a lot of synthesis that needs to be done. I love talking to people. I love listening to ideas. How can I use AI in 2025 to leverage these things to speed up, maybe, right? To help me research faster, to help me find things that I may not have found out. Is that something that you use today?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like the way we're able to use AI to help is becoming more and more integrated into our workflow. There's more tools. The tools we have are becoming better. Like I said earlier, the design brief we came up with, ChatGPT gave me that in matter of seconds. So just to kind of create that today and go through this exercise was really helpful. Yeah, the synthesis is a big part. So taking all those interviews and all that information and synthesizing that into pain points and a narrative is becoming really helpful with AI. So there's a lot we could look at with using Notebook LM and other tools that we use a lot now.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you want to show? Because this is really exciting stuff. And I know we have 3 videos lined up. This was part 1, part 2 is AI, and part 3 is actually designing for agentic experience. Is there anything else that you want to show us today, or should we keep everything, all the exciting stuff for part number 2?
Yeah, I think that's a really good overview. I would say, this timeline, we're looking at the process, and we kind of talked about in a matter of weeks or months, but this process might be something. I was thinking about this, as we were going through it. This could be a new feature that I get and I work on it for 2 days, and I might go through the same process in 2 days. I might, we need to add a new button to a screen that helps people on a map. And you go through empathy and define and ideate maybe in an hour. You think, okay, what's happening now, or what are other people doing? And So this doesn't necessarily have to look like months at a time. It's maybe
Right.
you do one phase in an afternoon where you say, okay,
Hmm.
I'm just going to do some research for an hour and then
Hmm.
go into ideate, and I might sketch some ideas. So this is a repeatable process in a lot of different ways.
This was really educational, very informative, a lot to digest, and I know there are two more sessions planned, and I'm extremely excited for the next two sessions, because one is on AI and then the third is designing for the agentic experience. um, Selfishly for me, if I were to get access to some of these things, would can I get access to maybe Lucid, like pictures, things like that, so that I can put that as part of my as a link as part of this description, so that not just me, the other viewers can get access to this project timeline?
Yeah, I'll think about how to yeah, we can share this, and
Okay.
yeah, definitely, yeah, give people access.
Awesome. Awesome. Fantastic. um, yeah, I think that's a wrap. We will see you again in the next video, where we talk how AI can speed up synthesis and how experience designers can use AI in 2025.
All right, that sounds great. Looking forward to it.
All right.